The Isdal Woman, a Cold War Mystery. Chapter 1. The Discovery. November 29th, 1970. A bitter cold morning in the Isdalen Valley near Bergen, Norway. Two hikers, a father and daughter, ventured through the remote valley, known ominously as Death Valley by the locals. As they navigated the rugged terrain, a horrific sight stopped them in their tracks. Hidden among the rocks, partially shielded by overhanging branches, lay the body of a woman, charred, lifeless, and twisted into an unnatural position. The stench of gasoline lingered in the air. Nearby, strange items lay scattered: a broken umbrella, pieces of plastic bottles, jewelry, and traces of sleeping pills. But what stood out was the way the body had been burned, intensely, but only in certain areas, as if someone had deliberately tried to destroy evidence. The hikers immediately fled the scene, their hearts racing, certain that something far more sinister than an accident had occurred. When police arrived, they were confronted with a mystery unlike anything they had ever seen. The woman's identity was a complete enigma, and the investigation would lead into a maze of false identities, espionage, and one of the most chilling cold cases in Norway's history. Chapter 2. A Woman Without a Name. The initial examination of the scene revealed several odd details. The woman had no identification on her, and any potential clues had seemingly been erased. Her fingerprints had been meticulously sanded off, leaving no way to match her to any known database. Investigators found traces of gasoline on her clothing, suggesting that an effort had been made to burn not only her body, but her identity as well. Adding to the strangeness, every label had been removed from her clothing: coats, dresses, and undergarments, all stripped of any indication of where they had come from. Investigators were baffled. Who was this woman, and why had someone gone to such lengths to erase her from existence? A lead emerged from the few unburnt items found nearby. The broken pieces of sunglasses and an empty bottle of liqueur provided no direct answers, but hinted at something deliberate, like they were discarded in haste yet carefully chosen to avoid leaving anything traceable. Chapter 3. The Suitcases. The mystery deepened a few days later when investigators found two suitcases at the Bergen railway station, linked to the Isdal Woman. Inside, they uncovered a treasure trove of bizarre and puzzling items: several wigs, prescription glasses without lenses, cosmetics, and clothing. Again, with all the labels carefully removed. There was also a teaspoon that investigators traced to a hotel in the city of Stavanger, and a diary filled with cryptic notes that looked like code. Perhaps the most important discovery was a prescription for Lachen from a doctor in Rome, written under the name Claudia Tielt, an alias the woman had used at various hotels in Europe. This discovery sent a shockwave through the investigation. Why was she using false identities? Who was she hiding from? At this point, what seemed like an isolated tragedy turned into something far more complex. As investigators dug deeper, they began to wonder if they had stumbled upon a deadly game of espionage. Chapter 4. A Woman of Many Faces. As the investigation continued, it became clear that the Isdal Woman had been traveling under multiple identities. She had stayed in several hotels across Norway and Europe under different names: Genevieve Lancier, Claudia Tielt, Vera Jarl, and others. Each time she gave a different nationality, sometimes Belgian, sometimes French, or even from Luxembourg. Witnesses who interacted with her described a woman in her 30s, strikingly elegant, often dressed in sophisticated clothing. She spoke French, but with an accent that no one could quite place, and occasionally used broken German. Hotel staff across multiple cities remembered her clearly. She kept to herself, avoided contact with other guests, and rarely made conversation. But one detail stood out to everyone who saw her. There was something unnerving about her demeanor, as though she was constantly on edge, always watching the door, as if she was being followed. It became clear she wasn't simply a tourist or businesswoman. She was a woman in hiding. But from whom and why? Chapter 5. A Cold War Connection. As investigators pieced together the woman's movements, a troubling theory began to emerge. The Isdal Woman might have been involved in espionage. Norway in 1970 was a vital hotspot for NATO during the Cold War. With its proximity to the Soviet Union and its strategic importance in the Arctic region, the country was a hub for intelligence operations. Foreign spies, both Soviet and Western, operated in the shadows, gathering information and playing dangerous games of cat and mouse. The Isdal Woman's careful disguises, multiple identities, and her erratic travels across Europe in the months leading up to her death suggested a woman who was deeply enmeshed in something secretive. Could she have been a spy, operating under deep cover? The coded notes in her diary were examined by Norwegian intelligence officers. After weeks of trying to decipher the strings of letters and numbers, a breakthrough came. The codes referenced locations and dates, likely recording her movements across Europe. But this revelation only deepened the mystery. Why would someone track their own movements in such an encrypted way? Was she following someone? Was she sending a message? And most importantly, what had gone wrong? Chapter 6. The Frenchman. One of the most significant clues came from a man staying at one of the hotels in Bergen during the Isdal Woman's visit. He recalled seeing her in the company of another guest, a man described as French-speaking. Their conversations were hurried and often tense, and the man seemed particularly agitated on the few occasions they were seen together. This Frenchman was the last person seen with the woman before her disappearance. Investigators suspected he might be her handler, an operative from the same spy network, or perhaps an enemy agent she was meeting in secret. Efforts to trace this man, however, hit a dead end. He had checked out of the hotel without a trace, leaving behind no identification, and just like the woman, he seemed to vanish into thin air. Witnesses who remembered their interaction described it as strained, almost combative. Some believed they were involved in a covert operation gone wrong. Others speculated that the man might have been responsible for her death. Despite multiple leads, the mysterious Frenchman was never found. Chapter 7. The Supernatural Whisperings. While the authorities were grappling with the mounting evidence of espionage, locals whispered about something darker, a curse. The Isdalen Valley was often called Death Valley by those who lived nearby, known for tragic accidents, suicides, and eerie occurrences. Some old tales spoke of witches who once used the valley for dark rituals, and some believed the valley itself was cursed, a place where the living weren't meant to linger. Hunters and hikers had long reported strange happenings in the valley, unseen figures, sudden drops in temperature, and feelings of intense dread. Could this woman have been a victim of something supernatural? Or was her death a byproduct of something more grounded? Dangerous men working in the shadows, using ancient myths to cover their tracks. While the locals clung to their folklore, the police knew they were dealing with something very real and likely very deadly. Chapter 8. The Final Days. The more investigators uncovered, the more they were able to piece together the Isdal Woman's final days. She had arrived in Bergen in mid-November, staying in a modest hotel under yet another alias, Elizabeth Lienhauer. She kept mostly to herself, occasionally leaving the hotel to make phone calls from public booths or to wander the streets of the city. But in the days leading up to her death, her behavior grew increasingly erratic. On November 23rd, she checked out of the hotel, appearing anxious and on edge. She told the receptionist she was headed to the train station, but was seen walking in the opposite direction, toward the mountains that loomed over the city. The details of what happened next remained shrouded in mystery, but witnesses later came forward saying they had seen a woman matching her description, hiking alone toward Isdalen Valley. Was she meeting someone? Running from someone? Or had she decided, at the very last moment, to disappear for good? Chapter 9. The Theories and Dead Ends. The investigation spun in multiple directions as more theories surfaced. Some believed the Isdal Woman had been a victim of a secret operation gone wrong, a spy betrayed by her own side, or killed by an enemy agent. Others speculated that she had been involved in smuggling or some other illicit activity, using her multiple identities to move between countries unnoticed. Norwegian police also explored the possibility that she had been part of a larger network of spies, possibly involved in passing sensitive intelligence about NATO or Soviet operations. Her frequent trips to key Cold War cities only fueled this theory, But the deeper they delved, the more obstacles they encountered. Files disappeared, witnesses recanted their statements, and the investigation began to hit dead ends at every turn. There was even speculation that some of the authorities had been pressured to drop the case by higher powers, an indication that her death might have been linked to a far-reaching covert operation. Chapter 10. The Unsolved Mystery. More than 50 years after the discovery of the Isdal woman's body, her identity remains unknown. Forensic advancements have shed some light on her origins. Analysis of her teeth and jaw suggested she had likely grown up near Nuremberg. Germany during World War II, an isotope analysis of her hair confirmed that she had traveled extensively through Europe in the months leading up to her death. But these findings, though important, have done little to solve the larger mystery. Was she a spy in the dangerous game of Cold War espionage, betrayed and left to die in a remote Norwegian valley? Was she part of an underground smuggling operation that ended in violence? Or was she simply a woman running from a past she could never truly escape? Despite decades of investigation, no conclusive evidence has surfaced to explain her fate. The Isdal woman's story remains one of the most haunting and puzzling mysteries in modern history, a cold case that still captivates investigators and conspiracy theorists alike, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions. And so, the enigma of the Isdal woman lingers, her secrets buried deep in the frozen soil of a remote Norwegian valley, where the shadows of the Cold War still loom, and the truth remains just out of reach.